Good morning. Excuse my shirt. This is not a professor's kind of shirt, I think. But let me get this done, and you can rate me on my attire another day. This is a video of the futuring and content change. I'm sorry, the futuring and change skills. And I'm trying to teach you that I don't think the regular course books actually teach enough of, if at all. So last week, hopefully you watched that one. That was sort of obviously a prelude to this piece, and there will be another video uh, at next week to sort of wrap it up. And if you have more interest in that, you can find much more detail in my in the webinar, the video I sent you from Solution Tree, and also even more so in the the three books that I authored in the recommended list that I offered you to read for the course assignment or for your own professional growth. So what I'm going to do now is continue the PowerPoint and post this. This will be a second PowerPoint, post it in another module that will be for content for the week of I guess starting today, the 13th through the 26th or something along those lines. I get mixed up on the dates, but obviously in consecutive order. So here we go. We will share in a moment. Won't be a moment because I have to bring it up. And we're getting closer. Just stay with me for a moment. I think this is it. Yep, it is. All right, so we'll go back to top one, and we're ready to roll. I'm going to post the PowerPoint too separately, so you have it to look at more clearly at your own pace if you need to do that. Again, this is a continuation of the video from the previous week, where I kind of laid the foundation for some of these things. And by way of summary, and I don't like to read to people any more than you like to be read to. You'll see that basically summarizing last week's video, which goes into the premise that there are key issues that I would like to point out, and that you can find in any number of places in research about the capacity to change. One cannot change unless one has been nurtured to have the capacity to change. And here we go. And so I want to make sure I'm recording too, because I get nervous about this. So let me make sure that I am. Stop the share for a moment. Yes, I'm recording. So I'll go back to the share. And now we're ready to rock and roll. All right, so at one time or another, one of these components is more important than another. All of these components have to be present, but not necessarily all at the same time. Sometimes you need to stress one muscle over another, and that's about you are taking the pulse of how you see your group, your stakeholder group, whether it be your department, whether it be an entire school, or whether it be a community gathering, organizational gathering, or a district premise. All of these apply in any of those places. They're all the same premise. And so each component must be there, but it doesn't have to be there all at once, all at the same time. I guess the best metaphor I may have used before with you is kind of if you have ever played chess or even checkers, you know that you can't move all the pieces at once. You need to move the pieces uh, according to strategically how they're best suited to what you have to do. So think of it as a chess game as such. Their strengths exceed their sum, he shouted, which is to say that uh, even though I'm going to give you these in pieces, when you put them all together, they are very powerful. It's a very powerful package that you can use, and there are other packages as well. But there's a very package assemblage of what you need to be more nearly assured that you've created the capacity to get change off the ground, and more importantly, to sustain them. And so the strengths do exceed their sum. And there's lots of research to point that out. And I pointed, and I will continue to do that as we move through the course. Uh, Basically, what you need to do is to assess the capacity of the organization to transform itself. It was interesting. I was telling two students and I were individually talking yesterday about some problems that we're having with Canvas, and I have problems with Canvas myself, so I understand that. And we worked out a few wrinkles that they needed to have straightened out. And I was telling them about a story was I was playing golf with my old music teacher when I was a principal. And yeah, we're both old, I guess, now. And he was a wonderful orchestra teacher. The man knew all sorts of how to play every kind of instrument you can think. And he, more than that, he knew how to weld a group of youngsters together to really make some nice music together and um, give them great skills in music. And I asked him about why he didn't become an administrator himself. And he said he just didn't, he just preferred to stay in the music realm. And I understood that. I said, so if anybody had made you a music director and you were in charge of creating change, what would you have done? And he said, well, the first thing I would do is I would have all my music teachers assess every kid for their skill sets and take them so that everybody would know where they needed to take every child from, rather than taking everybody all at once and trying to move them together, which everyone knows is just doesn't work in any academic subject, quite frankly. And so I let him talk for a while, and finally, and I don't usually talk to people this way, but I can get away with it with this person. I said, "Well, yeah, you're doing it the way most music directors would do it, but it's all wrong." And he looked at me, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, you got to start from the bottom up. You've got to get people to see the reason for what you're trying to do, and to weld the reason for what you're trying to do with the vision that these people may or may not have." He said, "Well, they wouldn't have done it if I told them what to do." I said, "Well, then what does that tell you?" Well, they don't have a shared vision. I know they don't have a shared vision. So aren't those things you need to start from in order for you to move your group forward, to move the group forward? And he said, I never thought of that. Now, many of you are most of you are teachers, so you may not have thought of that either about, and then again, you may be coming from how you have been treated as a teacher by the leaders who sign your paychecks, who may not understand some of the things we're talking about today. And so the whole premise of assessing the capacity of the organization to transform itself is key to so much of what we're talking about. And Fullen and Hargraves do a great job with this in their conversation about professional capital. And that's as good a place as any to go, although I think I do a good job of speaking to it too, but I'll always defer to Michael Fullen when we're talking about the same things as such. Now, there's a bit of a formula here to talk about, and I'm not going to belabor you on this at this point. What I'm basically saying is, if you want to be a futures-based change leader, the shorthand for that is futures-based change, is FBCL. You need to see how it kind of looks. So the metaphor I offered was three pieces, three aspects of futuring. One would be collaboration, which I kind of alluded to a few minutes ago. One would be systems thinking, which I talked a little bit about in the last uh, video, and something called Theory U, which is really about design thinking. Now, design thinking, collaborating, and systems thinking, if-thenning, which we talked a little bit about last week, and I'm going to come into in more detail in a moment. Uh, If-then thinking, futures thinking, all have to come together uh, and circle around the axle. Okay, so the wheel's turning around the axle of what I call futuring. So keep that in the back of your mind, and let's roll forward with another premise. I'm going to go through this rather quickly, but I just want to mention it to you. And you will never think of deciding the same as you after I show you what I mean by deciding. Think about any decision that you made today, whether you were going to wear your sneakers or your loafers or your sandals or go barefoot, or think about which way you were going to part your hair if you had hair to part, or whether you were going to vote for person X versus person Y in any election that that you have voted in or that you will be voting in next time we have elections. And so essentially decisions look like this. I did show this to you. I'm showing it to you again with a better chart, actually. They always be, I'm going left to right. So I'm starting from facts to information. I'm going over to values and feelings. Now, decisions don't always but necessarily look like that. Decisions go back and forth, in and out. But if you broke it all out and say, well, how did you get to the decision that you made, the choice that you made that choice based on these components, that you had information and data, and the goals emerged from that. Hey, President Trump, there's an epidemic coming. Looks like the whole world's going to suffer from it. It's coming to the United States. What are our goals? Even though it's going on, I guess, 5 years or maybe more than 5 years now ago, you can pretty much remember how things went in terms of what we thought we needed to do to prevent the spread of that pandemic. And so there were many goals, but for example, there were three goals. Don't do anything about it. Inject everybody with every kind of medicine we could find. I think Trump said something about was it iodine or something that he thought he had read it was the cure-all. And the third choice would be to vaccinate people, which he also did down the line. All right, so those are your three goals. Now we'll skip over futuring for a minute. We'll go all the way over to the right side of the equation. Uh, People made choices and the government made choices uh, based on our values and our feelings about what we thought we wanted to happen, what our preferred future was. And our preferred future was to have as few people get sick or die from it uh, as possible. And so choices were made. The choices were based on the if-thens. The choices were based on the futuring. Now keep that in the back of your little mind. Let's go to the next place. Now this is from my book. I've looked at futuring and I've divided it into four discrete stages. All right. They are pretty much in sequence. I wouldn't say they're totally in sequence, but they are definitely easily sorted into this kind of sequence. First one would be what I call type 1 futuring, which is what we call information gathering, followed by 2, which is two-dimensional if-then forecasting, which is as far as we're going to go today, and not even all the way through that. That's as far as we're going today, followed by type 3 development, which is three-dimensional futuring, then scenario development and action design. But we're only going to do the first two today, just to get your whistle wet as such. So we got to get information. Now to go back to this slide here about facts and information. Let me give you an example of bad deciding based on bad facts. And there's plenty of examples about this. So the one I'm going to give you is um, the second Iraq War. Now remember, we had come through a terrible time where 9/11, and when we had been attacked, and we lost over 3,000 people in horrible attacks, and terrorism was at the front of our concern, fear of that, and a lot of anger, understandably so, and people wanted to do certain things. So President Bush, George W. Bush at the time said, "Okay, well, one of the things we're going to do is we're going to try to stop terrorism at its roots." And so one thing we're going to do is we're going to attack Iraq because Iraq has weapons of mass destruction, and those weapons are pointing at us and endanger us terribly. So we're going to invade Iraq and we're going to get rid of those weapons. Well, we did that. We went and we invaded Iraq, and guess what? There weren't any weapons. Doesn't mean we shouldn't have invaded Iraq for other reasons, but certainly the information we had was faulty, he shouted. And so the more of an opportunity we can to gather information, the better. And so all real change has to begin with information gathering. By the way, I wish I had time to talk more about this. One way to do this is with a four-letter word. Are you ready? Which isn't really a four-letter word. Don't pay attention. I'd never use a four-letter word with you except for data, maybe, would be AI. AI now enables us to do a lot of this that we sometimes often do with human beings. I kind of favor working it with human beings, but the AI can certainly be a crutch to help the human beings get all the information they possibly can. Now, I'm just gonna read these at you. I have another PowerPoint that gets into great detail about all of these things. There's only one I'm going to spend some time on today. So you could, if you were going to form a group to plan for massive future changes, you might want to get study groups together about the various issues that go on. Is there a gap, for example, between uh, the general education population's achievement and the special education students, and or the ELL students, and or the poverty-stricken students? So there's lots of places to do that. And the study groups go out and roll up their sleeves, get their fingernails dirty, and go get the information and bring it back to the whole. There's focus groups, which is something of the same idea. You can bring in experts from a foreign country, from outside, to comment on what they see about the demographics changing, for example. You can get panel discussions of various kind of experts or people very invested in these premises and go through that. Believe it or not, you can do field trips. And I wish I had time to get into that one. You can do something called trend extrapolation. I'm not going to do that here, but you are very used to this because just about any time you pick up a magazine or read anything in the paper, you're going to see something like the trend shows this, and this. It's a dangerous thing to do because unless you really get underneath what the trends may be saying, but certainly you can say that and go and take it from there. So, as an example, you could say that crime is increasing. I don't think it is actually. I think the trend's going in the other direction. And say, well, if it continues on the same direction, we'll have less crime, or we'll have more crime, depending on which way the line is going on the graph. And that's a future that you think that you see. Have to be careful about that one because sometimes the line can change for any number of reasons, but we can put it up there for now. You can do a SWOT analysis. I'm going to do something with that in a moment. And we're going to speak briefly about root cause identification. That's the subject for 30 hours of work, really. Uh, or in a good description in a good chapter of book someplace. And I'm going to have to play this one. You can't see it very well. And so what you do is you bring together as many information gathering sources as you can. Put AI in there if you want as a new tactic. You may use some of those other ones. You should use some of those other ones, and you should also always use a SWOT, a root cause, and a root cause approach as well. SWOT is an acronym. Many of you probably know it, many of you do not. And this is sort of a first brick in the building of any kind of change process, believe it or not. There are other versions of this. I'm just giving you a very simple one right now. And SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, threats, and opportunities. So if you watch my arrow, it goes around in a clockwise fashion from strengths all the way around to opportunities. In strengths, your group tries to figure out, based on the information that you've gathered, uh, what are the strong things that the community's got? What's strong about it? What's a plus? Then you go over to the opposite side of the street and say, what are the weaknesses of our community? How are we threatened? So what should we do about it? What opportunities should we create to overwhelm the weaknesses and magnify the strengths and eliminate the threats? I just put some examples in here about a community with pro-education values, but that is poor, that is threatened by bad leadership or bad teachers, or by charter schools, or by homeschooling, all the things that are out there now that are attempts to change what we do in public education. Make no mistake about that. Charter schools, especially those of you who work in the city, you're familiar with the premise. Homeschooling, which at one time was a nothing and now is becoming a growing trend. Okay. and private schools. All those things are being very much favored, but for example, by the present presidential administration, are threats to public schools, no question about it. And so what you do is you get your groups into identifying these things, and you get a very lively conversation about this, where you can use all the information gathering activities that you had before it, as long as you insist on objective evidence, not on just what somebody heard, in the local uh, uh, restaurant. Okay, always try to get consensus. Consensus is more or less the idea of getting unanimous agreement. Easier said than done. You don't go forward if you can't get some kind of strength sense of consensus. If it's consensus is split, then you've got to go back and get consensus about to modify the points of view you're hearing. And what's also very important, we might then realize, well, we don't know everything we need to know. We did all these information gathering things, but we don't know about what the economics forecasts are. Or we don't know what the population trend is. Or we don't know that what the poverty levels are and why these people are poor. And let's take a look at that more carefully. So a SWOT analysis is, again, not the only way to approach this, but it is a way you may want to go forward with this. Then from that, you go into what we call root cause identification. I can do 30 hours on this all by itself. Basically, it goes down to what are the deepest, most fundamental reasons that drive the issues that you think you've uncovered. An example here, I'll give you one example, and it really is a problem in lots of places nowadays, is attendance. COVID has been a big problem for attendance, especially since COVID has hit, but it really has hit the poorer communities more than the more affluent ones. And what do you do about that? What's the root cause behind that? Well, yeah, you could say it was COVID, but it wasn't that. It was lots of other things. I was in a building doing some consulting work a couple of years ago, and I kept going back because and my colleagues were talking to kids in the high school. Why weren't they coming to class? And they weren't coming to class, A, because they needed to work and make money for the family. That was the first cause. And B, another cause was they hated the way they were being taught. So I went back to the principal. I said, there's a lot of teachers here who probably needs a lot of professional development to upgrade their instructional qualities. And didn't want to hear about it. All right. He said, well, that's not a cause. I said, well, the kids are saying that. So either you ignore what the kids are saying or you figure out a way to accommodate it. And what you can do, and you can do this with your family tonight, you can do it in the faculty room as a practice. You can use it in your classroom for anything you're teaching. There's a technique called the 5 whys, WHY. Basically, it's a Japanese business technique that essentially says if you ask a good why question, versions of the same of that question 5 times, you're going to get to the real root causes. Why were you late, Johnny? I didn't wake up. Why didn't you wake up, Johnny? The clock didn't go off. Why didn't the clock go off? My mother didn't set it. Why did your mother set it? They were having another fight. My parents were having another fight. That's the root cause. And so that root cause, which may have been, covered with lots of leaves and wasn't so apparent, was an issue why Johnny was late. Now, if you try this with your students or with your family, then they're going to hate you. They're going to take off their shoe and throw it at you because it's a very tense kind of question when you ask it. But if you practice doing that, you will get to root causes of the premises that you really want to solve. Okay, so that was root. I'm going to go back to the top on that. That's information gathering. And that can take weeks to do. It's not something you do in one day. But until you get that foundation down and finally get down to a SWOT, among other premises, again, you can read the book and get other ones from that, where you can uncover the issues that are going on and get to the root causes, because the root causes are the issues that you're trying to solve. That's where your goals lie. And so it's a natural progression to go to type 2. Understanding now, I'm only going to take you through a part of two-dimensional causes right now. Not going to take you all the way through because I know I can be very pedantic and I don't want to bore you. Although this is good material, if he smiled. kind of arrogantly maybe, that will help you be a much more successful leader and or a teacher or community person than you have ever been taught how to do this. I did this whole premise once with changing our bus schedule. As mundane as that sounded, it was a major premise in the district I was assigned for that. And I took them through all of this, and they really wanted to run out the door a few times. But when we got to the end of the entire process, they had actually changed the bus schedule in magnificent ways that had never occurred to anyone, okay, to really accommodate the needs that we uncovered, they uncovered. And so we get to type two. Now, type two is if then. Type two is superficial causes, which is where we spend too much of our time. There's a great book called Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow by William, I think his first name was William Kahneman, just passed away about 2 years ago. He won a Nobel Prize a couple of times, a very, very sharp fella. And he talks about two types of thinking. One is slow thinking and one is fast thinking. People like to think fast because it doesn't make their hair hurt. People don't like to think slowly because that means they're being forced to analyze and get down underneath it. And so the metaphor I always use everywhere I go is two metaphors. I throw a rock into the middle of a puddle. What do I get? I get ripples. And so the question is, what caused the ripple effects? If I threw the rock in the puddle, then I got ripples. If I get punched in the face, then my nose bleeds. Then I punch the person in the face on the back. I hope that's not true, but I punch the person and give her or him, not her, him a that's a sexist comment, but I'm sticking with it. Uh, give him a bloody nose. All ripple effect things slow. There's a great video, and I think I'm going to put this. I'll send it to you. Not today. I haven't got time. Of a gymnasium filled with ping pong tables. And on the ping pong tables are mouse traps, hundreds of thousands of mouse traps. And on each mouse trap, which is set, is a ping pong ball. And what I do is if I throw a ping pong ball anywhere in the room, in the gym, it hits one mouse trap. The mouse trap springs up. Now I have two ping pong balls up in the air. And then it hits and hits two more. And then two more equals four more. Before I knew it, I have a gymnasium filled with bouncing ping pong balls. That's called a geometric progression rather than a linear one. And that's what happens as you try to calculate where all the ping pong balls are going to go. But we're not talking about that quite yet. We're talking about simple if-thens. Okay? And so that's where we're going. I bring you back to the decision chart I gave you before, which is only a very rudimentary description of what decisions actually are. Descriptions of decisions, rather, are very difficult to actually understand. And there's all sorts of theories about them. And you should be familiar with some of them as a leader because leaders decide all day long. Even teachers, by research, seem to decide across the day, make up to 300 decisions a day. Miss Smith, can I go to the bathroom? Yes, you can go, Johnny, or no, you cannot, is the decision. Should I call on Mary Jones or should I call on Sammy Sosa to answer that question? Or should I call on, I'm thinking of baseball players, to Mickey Mantle to answer the question, which is pretty hard for him to do because he's dead, uh, because he's not raising his hand. Those are all decisions that you make. So it does have value to take okay, but what we're trying to do now is to get the groups to talk to each other. So I put a group of people together, and there's lots of ways to do that. Some very fascinating ways. And I get them to begin to talk to each other, and I get them to create the first graphic I'm going to teach you, and then I'm going to stop. I'll continue with this on the next week because what we're trying to do is to generate a momentum for deeper thinking, for the William Kahneman slow thinking approaches, which again, we're not talking about doing this in 15 minutes. These are things that you do with a generous time allotment. And so we have a futures tool. I have here called the futures wheel. And you can see I put the the link to this in a website called mindtools.com. Sometimes you have to pay for this thing, so don't do that. But if you get into that mindtools.com, or if you Google it other ways, you're going to find some really neat descriptions of what a futures wheel could look like in a school setting. And what you're going to do then is chart possible, probable, and preferable ripple effects. So there's a potential for fancy words. Fancier words would be primary, secondary, tertiary, and tertiary consequences of a given future. So if the Martians land tomorrow, what's my possible futures? What's my probable? What's my preferable? Have them go away or make friends with them? I don't know. And those projections are all based on what the information is that you've got from the information gathering segment, which you can't skip over. You cannot skip over the information gathering strategy. What you're going to do then is, if you're leading that group, you're going to narrow from possible to probable. You're not going to go to preferable. You're going to go from possible to probable. Eventually, you're going to narrow it to preferable futures as you begin to start to think about how you're going to design and use disciplines, systems disciplines to think about how to do this. This is an example of a futures wheel. I put the future in the middle, and I leave all these little blanks out. And what I basically do is go to how one leads to the other. Before you know it, you have many possible and subset would be a probable sets of futures that you're looking at. Okay, and I'm stopping there. I'll continue with this in the next video, maybe even another one this weekend, but certainly in the week after this, you'll see the sort of the culmination to this. And if your head hasn't started to hurt yet, it's going to, because these are skill sets that no one has taught you and that you have never seen before, and yet are vital to really assuring yourself that you're going to have the kinds of changes that you want to have, rather than just sort of throwing ideas out and hoping that people will accept them. That could work too, but it's also much more messy and much more sloppy and much more likely to not sustain itself over time. And with that, I will stop the share and post another video in a little while, a content video this time. I'm not changing my shirt though.